everyone, it's Holly, and today I wanted to talk about a topic that I feel like I could go off on for hours, if not days. And that is required reading. So required reading would be the books that you are required to read in school or forced to read, because even myself, a lifelong reader, a never book quitter, like I've never gone through a phase where like I didn't really read that lasted longer than like a month. I did not read every book that I was assigned to read in school, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, I have a lot of feelings, opinions on this topic. I'm gonna try and keep this like not super rambly and not super long, but it's something I've always felt very strongly about. I graduated from high school. I went to school in New York State, and I graduated from high school in 2007 for reference. So if things have changed, which I don't think they have, especially in New York State, then good. I hope they have changed. I know Jessica from Peace Love Books. She's an English teacher in Ohio, and it seems like, I don't know about like her actual like traditional English classes, but it seems like she does like a guided reading class, and I don't know if that's for everybody or just certain students, but it seems like there's a lot more modern books in that and a lot more freedom in reading, which, as we'll see throughout this video, hopefully is kind of what I would like to see more of, and I'll explain why. But I hope more schools are like that and have programs like that and classes like that and teachers like that. And part of the problem is like, and I don't want this to come across as bashing teachers. I mean, there are bad teachers. It's not so much the teachers as it is the school districts and the government. I know I can only speak for New York State because that's the district I grew up in, or that's the state I grew up in. I did all of my education in New York State, including college, and I was pursuing a teaching degree, and I would have like 90% stayed in New York. Like unless I couldn't have found a job in New York State, I would have stayed here. So it is the district where I did credit hour, or it's the state I did credit hours in. It's the state I know the most about. So the state and the school districts kind of set the teachers up so that they have very limited flexibility. Again, at least in New York. I will say that I think reading should be a huge part of your education. In elementary school, middle school, high school, college, obviously college is a little different because depending on your major and what type of classes you're taking. But I definitely think reading should be a huge part of that. I think reading is so fundamental to everything. If there's nothing else you do if you have a child, read to them. It is a huge marker of success. It creates better vocabulary, stronger reading comprehension. It is just so important. And so I do think that it needs to be done in school. However, I think that we should teach foundational texts and we should teach classics. Like I think everybody should have to read Shakespeare. Like not all of Shakespeare. I haven't read all of Shakespeare. But I definitely think that like you should probably read 1 or 2 tragedies and 1 or 2 comedies. For sure. 100%. Does that mean you're gonna like all of them? No. Like, I don't know how many times I had to read Romeo and Juliet. I didn't like it. Every single time. I read it in high school. I read it in college. Murphy, can we not please? But I still think that like Shakespeare stories are really important, especially in English literature. And I think that, you know, I don't know what like the canon of foundational literature is, but I definitely think it should exist. However, I felt this way as a student. I feel this way now as an adult. And I was actually having a conversation with my mom last weekend when I dropped off her groceries about this, and she said that she had an issue when I was going through school. She was like, none of the books you read were by women, which isn't 100% true. I remember one in all of high school. But that's the point, right? Is a lot of these stories lack any kind of diversity, whether that's in race, ethnicity, religion, gender, genre even. Like, I would take any of those, just one. I would take any type of diversity to broaden what our students are learning and reading and being exposed to, especially as they get older. Like, I don't remember a ton about my elementary school readings, but I think that was definitely more diverse. That also could have been the school I was in. I was in a private school in elementary school. Do not get it twisted. It was not some fancy school. It was just, my parents had the choice of spending some money and sending me to a Catholic school that was in the city of Rochester, or sending me to the city of Rochester schools. And unfortunately, city of Rochester is not a good school district. Now, I loved my school. I loved my elementary school. It was an amazing place, but it was also very diverse in its, like, first of all, like, half my class wasn't even Catholic, because a lot of parents did the same thing mine did, where they just didn't want their kids going to the public school system in the city. So they made the choice and the sacrifice to send their kids to a private school. And if that meant they had to take a religion class every day for 30 minutes and go to church every Wednesday, then that was worth it. But my student body was very diverse. Like, I was in the minority as a white person, and that was like what I grew up in. And so I think maybe what I was exposed to was a little more diverse. I don't know. When I was in high school, I don't think we read anything that wasn't by a white person. I can remember one book that I didn't choose to read for a project that was by a woman. Everything else was by a man in high school. We didn't read anything outside of, like, straight fiction. No genre, unless, again, it was something that, like, I chose to read for a project. I'm trying to think if there would be any, if I'm forgetting anything, but I don't think I am. And unless you're talking about, like, Greek history, like Greek mythology or something, I don't think I read anything that featured or would have had characters whose religious background, whether that was prevalent or just understood, wasn't Christian. Again, lacking in diversity in a whole, like, so many ways. These books lacking diversity doesn't necessarily make them bad. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't have read them. It doesn't mean that they weren't important books. You know, I may not have enjoyed them. Like, I did not like Lord of the Flies. I can't stand Lord of the Flies. I think it probably is a classic worth reading. Ooh, it was really hard for me to say that, but I feel like I could be swayed. I really didn't like it though. Like, I don't like Romeo and Juliet, like I said, but I can see why that would be an important piece to read. And especially for high schoolers, I think maybe that's a more approachable Shakespeare play to read. So I get it. But you have to admit that whether those books are good or bad, whether they're canonical or not, they all have things in common, and they're all missing things. And I think that this lack of diversity in all of these different ways really contributes to this lack of interest in reading in, like, the best case of in the best case scenario, and an actual hatred of it in a worst case scenario. I think for a lot of people who aren't readers from a young age, who aren't like me, and probably you if you're watching this, but maybe not. Maybe you're a late bloomer in the reading world. Welcome. You are all welcome. But when the books that you're exposed to are dry, feel like they have no connection to you, no connection to your current society, your current life, or quite frankly, no connection to you if, like, you're completely a different person than these people and you're not being instructed properly, it can lead to a hatred of reading, and it can lead to, well, all books are like this. And that makes me really sad. Like, it really does. It's just awful. I think it also contributes to snobbery as like an aside. I think by only teaching certain types of books, like only teaching classics and stuff, you set this precedent and this idea that these are the only valuable books. These are the only valuable writers. These are the only valuable genres. And that's toxic, potentially. Personally, what I would like to see is a couple of things. One is more autonomy for both teachers and students. I think if students had freedom, even if it was literally like one book a year, and it was like, we want you to pick one book that you're going to read, any book, we don't care what it is. If you want to set some sort of like age limit or category or whatever, then that's fine. You read one book and maybe you do something with that. Whether it's a book report, you can still do like scholarly research and a paper on it if you want, but have the students pick their own book. And give teachers the ability to have more flexibility with the subject matter that they're teaching. Because I do not believe for a second that every English teacher like wants to teach The Old Man and the Sea over and over and over again. Maybe you do. Maybe you do. Maybe you love it and you think it's amazing to read it every year and to teach it every year and have the same conversations every year. I would find that boring. I also would like to see the way books and reading is taught to be changed to include multiple subjects. So by this I mean, like, I remember reading fiction novels in my history classes in college, and they're very informative. And whether they were ones I liked, like Don Quixote, or they were ones I didn't like Heart of Darkness, which I had to read 3 times. And at that point I was a good student and I read it every time. I read it once in high school and twice in college, and I did in fact read it every single time. And I hate it with a burning passion. But I read it every time. But still, I read it for, one was for an English class, one was for a history class in college. And reading those things and looking at them in the context of the history in which they live is so important. And I think you get that sometimes in an English class, especially with a really good instructor. But I think including that in history and kind of having these things cross-pollinate more would be so beneficial for all parties, for teachers, for students, everybody. Also, one of the things I have always wanted to see is to see people do things like read a classic, you know, and then read Jane Austen and read and see and read and understand and talk about, you know, what society means and these like social constructs and what it means to be a woman and all of these things, and then read other books maybe set now, maybe written in the last 5-10 years, and see if they discuss the same themes. Why do they discuss the same themes? Have things changed? Have things not changed? And having those conversations. And I think that that would be so important and so helpful, especially if you read, like, I think high school English classes would benefit so much by including YA Lit in their classes, because YA Lit is written to appeal to that age group. It's gonna make them more engaged. It's gonna connect with them better. So just do it. And I'm not saying everything. Like I said, it doesn't have to be every book. But making that, like weaving that into the other things, I think is so important. And including more diversity, including more conversations, including those things are so, I cannot express to you how important it is to be exposed to ideas and concepts and people who are different than you. Fiction and books are a way to expose people to these things. And that includes nonfiction. I talked about this in my Anne Frank book memories, is reading her life showed me something about a historical event I had learned about and made it real and it made me feel more strongly about preventing this from ever happening again. I recently read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, and while I didn't love it, it was not my favorite piece of nonfiction ever, although her voice, gorgeous, because I listened to the audiobook read by her. Listening to her tell her story and her upbringing in a world I know nothing about, because I live in post-civil rights America, and while things are bad now, like, you can have an argument about things still not being equal and everything, it's not the same. Like, it's not. They're different challenges. Challenges are still challenges. They are still valid, but they're not the same. And so to hear this woman speak about her life and about how she felt about things, about how she felt about different people, about the way she was treated in various ways, was very eye-opening. Again, something that I know about because it's stuff I've learned about in history, but reading it from this one person's perspective helped something click in my mind. And I think that especially for kids who, even just by the nature of being young, are going to have less experience in the world, it's important to expose them to these things. Okay, this is going off on like tangents. This lack of diversity and control on the part of teachers is one of the reasons I chose to not continue with my teaching degree, to not continue on to my certification, because I knew I wouldn't be happy and I would probably become like a miserable teacher who hated her job, who hated her students due to no fault of their own, would have felt like I was letting them down. Yeah, and it wouldn't have necessarily been my fault, but I just wish things would change. All you can do is hope that there are teachers out there who are helping their students, and I think that there are teachers out there who build those relationships and help broaden their students' horizons, and that's amazing, and I'm so grateful for that. I just wish that was more universal. So them's my thoughts. I don't like to be super negative, so I feel like this is slightly negative, so I'm sorry. But this is something I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while, and it just really makes me sad that people don't like reading because they were forced to read like Catcher in the Rye or something and they hated it. Those people were let down. Okay, so yes, those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.